Alrighty. So, continuing on with Money Week. Um, we've already talked about reserve banking and how that's one of the evils of modern day money. How they can just boom 30 times the amount of money in the system and you don't get a say about it. And that's pretty crazy. But there's another thing that's pretty bad too. And this one is much more well known, much more understood because it's just printing money, right? The government just says, we want more money. Well, what are we going to do? Well, just print more. Just make more, right? But it's the scarcity of money that gives it its value, right? At least relative to itself. It's valuable. Dollars are valuable because they can be used to pay your taxes, right? That's the only legitimate guaranteed use. And that's because the government's has control over that. They say, hey, we control what you pay your taxes in. You pay them in this, and well, there you go. And as long as you believe that the government will still be around to, tax you another day, well, the dollar will be too. And that gives us some security in knowing that, hey, the tax will continue. It's one of the only two guaranteed things is death and taxes, right? So they're going to print more because they can. Because it's not based on anything else. It used to be that the dollar was based on how many silver bars they had that the government had. And if you gave them a $20 bill, well, then you would get a silver bar back, right? You just say, hey, here you go. Give me an ounce of silver, right? And even still today, it's about the same. It's like, I think somewhere like 12, 18 bucks for an ounce of silver, pure silver. So, something like that. Yeah. That's how it goes. But it's not like that anymore. And until now, I've been using the words currency and money interchangeably because that's how people talk. But technically speaking, that's not quite right. Currency moves like a current, like water. It flows. And the reason something's a currency is because it goes from person to person to person to person to person to person. It flows throughout the system, throughout the economy. That's a currency. Money is something that has value. And there's other attributes of it too, but pretty much, if something is a money, then it's probably also a currency. But if something's a currency, it's not guaranteed to be a money. So the dollar is a good example. It is definitely a currency. It flows through our system and people pay to that person, to that person, to that person, to that person, all the way through the economy. But is it a money? Can you bury it in the ground, dig it up years later, and have it still be valuable? The answer is no. It'll lose value because of inflation. It'll lose value because, hey, maybe they won't accept it anymore. I think they technically accept $2 bills, but, they don't print them anymore, and they might stop accepting them. People are talking about getting rid of the penny. Well, then are your pennies worthless? Just because the government said so? Yeah, probably. If that's what they decide to do. So, if they can just decide it has no value anymore, then did it have any value to begin with? And that's how it goes. Because the intrinsic value of a dollar bill is a piece of cotton paper this size. That's the intrinsic value. Even less so because it's got a whole bunch of writing junk on it. Yeah? You can't write on that cotton paper because there's a whole bunch of stuff and symbols on it. It's even less valuable than a piece of cotton paper. So, yeah. And that's how it goes. Our dollars are not truly, technically money. They're not money. Because money has value. You have a gold coin from 2,000, 10,000 years ago. It's still valuable today. Yeah, maybe it was more valuable back then. But it's still very valuable today. A 1 ounce gold coin, depending on its purity, it's like $1,000, right? Even if it has a Roman emperor stamped on it, still worth $1,000. That is a money. That has value. But it doesn't have to be precious metals. In Japan, they had a currency that was very much not practical, but it was a money as well. They used rice. Literally rice. And so you would buy some land and you would have like a block of rice, just tons of rice in just boxes and boxes and boxes. And so it's like, here's 10 years worth of rice and now I get your property. Trade. Like, that's literally what they did. Now they would have some like promises saying, oh yeah, well, it's more useful if I, pay you in rice over time and blah, blah, blah. But that's what it was backed by. It was backed by rice. It was a currency backed by rice. That's what made it money, was the rice. Because rice is valuable. You can eat rice. It has worth. And so really, anything can be a money if it's tied to something valuable. And so, if you have a dollar bill and says this dollar is not backed by the good faith of the government, but rather it is a guarantee that you hand that to someone and you will get something of value back, right? That you have a dollar and it is $1 for every single ear of corn in America, right? You got an ear of corn? Well, we print another dollar. You grew another one? We get to print another dollar, right? And if you want to eat some corn or use them for biodiesel or whatever, well, you trade that in at your local government place, and they'll say, "I'll take your dollar. Here's your corn. All good." That's money. That would be money. That would have a store of value. Maybe it won't last that long unless you dry it, but it's money. You can pop it and eat it at a movie. You can eat your money. I mean, that's cool, that's funny, that's silly. But that's how money works. Is if it has value tomorrow, then you feel more comfortable with it today. Now, what did that gain people to be certain of the value of their money tomorrow? Why was that a good thing? Well, because then whenever inflation happened, then it was because of a natural event. Someone struck gold in California, inflation happened. Japanese people have a particularly good harvest, inflation happened. There was a natural cause to inflation. Whereas today, what is the cause of inflation? Well, because the Federal Reserve wanted it. Because greedy people said, yeah, I think we want inflation. Why? Because I get the dollars first. That is not quite right. Because when it's driven by greed of human beings, a limitless thing, then it's not confined to natural events. It's not a reflection of how things are produced through nature. We can only get so many rocks out of the ground. We can only make so many things. We can only grow so many trees. Those are all natural things. But printing money, that's unnatural. There's nothing natural about it. It's not limited by how great our economy is. It's not limited by how amazing people are doing or our advancements in technology. No, it's limited by how many cheap pieces of paper can they buy. Turns out they can buy a lot because it's made out of cotton, cotton. So if they can mass produce shirts like this for $1, sell it to me for $5, well then I'm pretty sure they can mass produce dollar bills. And that's how it goes. But when it's tied to a natural process, then you're essentially indexing all goods that are being created by a particular good. And that makes sense. That if you say, well, everyone eats, flour, so we're going to use flour as the currency. And so I'll trade you 1 pound of flour for, 2 gallons of water. Probably a bad trade. But you know what I mean. That's how it works. That's how it would go. Is you say, hey, I want, a computer. Well, that's probably a ton of flour, right? Not very practical, but if you just index the price on it and said, well, $1 gets you, I think at the store right now it's like for 5-pound bag of flour you get something like it costs something like $2 or something. It's not much. So we'll just say that $1 gets you 2 pounds of flour, right? That's what it is. What, a computer costs $2,000? Well, then that's, 4,000 pounds of flour. There you go. Easy math, right? But then you're not valuing it in dollars anymore. You would say, oh, it costs 4,000 pounds. 4,000 pounds of, flour. That's the reason that the UK uses pounds as their currency is it's pound sterling, silver. It was based on silver. It was based on a weight of silver, and everything in their economy was indexed to silver. You can index it to any commodity, anything that is useful nearly universally, even if it's not absolutely universally. Like I use the example of flour. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of gluten-free people that are like, oh my gosh, my money's worthless. But it's not, because there are people who do use flour. It's very, very common. So, yeah, even if you don't use it, someone will. And so, the point here is that as long as the money is grounded in reality, in natural processes, and naturally occurring resources, then it can't go astronomical, like stratospheric, like some economies have, where they just print money, print money, print money, print money, and they say, "Oh well, but we need it though." Because we're greedy and we want to pay for things with our money. And so now we'll print $1,000 bills, $10,000 bills, $1,000,000 bills, $1 billion bills, $1 trillion bills. And like that's what countries have done. They just add zeros to the bill and then that gets some more stuff. But it's not worth anything. It's not valuable. Because you can change those numbers as much and as often as you want. But they are worthless. Numbers don't matter. What matters is what is physically in the world. And that's why one solution to inflation is to no longer have merely a currency, but to have a true money that is backed by or physically is an actual thing. A thing with value. Gold, silver, food, whatever. As long as it's a real thing with a real use that is made in nature, that has real value and can't just be artificially made, boom, all the way to infinity. As long as you do that, then, yeah. It'll be tied to natural processes. Because yes, you can only grow so much flour. Even if everyone in the world grew flour, there would only be so much of it. And yes, there would be inflation if someone decided to grow more. Absolutely. But is the real problem in the world that people would just say, "Oh, I'll have more flour than I can eat"? Well then, prices would increase. At the end of the day, it would still be valuable. You could still eat it, right? But that's why stuff like gold and silver are probably the best. They're the most practical. Because you can just dig a hole in the ground, toss them in there, come back 1,000 years later. They're still there. They're still fine. That kind of longevity is worth something too. And then you can dig it up and make it into some computer parts or something. Or some jewelry. Whatever. And so the point isn't, oh, we should have gold as money, because that's, who cares? The point is, our money is only money if it's grounded in reality. It's tied to something that's natural, physical, real. So, just make it do that. And that'll go a long way to making things make more sense. Be more efficient.